What's up guys, I'm Phoenix Master 1 and welcome to my Forma building guide for this month's Hall of Form's Revival featuring Shadows of Valentia units lettering Alm, Palla, Luthier, and Spring Delthea. So we're going to be having skills up to the lettering Ira and Athos banner, which means that stuff like Assault Force, Lagu's Loyalty, Brutal Tempest, Perfect Attack Speed, and Frost Moon are available for the taking, and a lot of the units from this Hall of Forms do appreciate it. And we also have Jihana Lance Plus in the pool, and that is pretty much the best unhittable Lance right now. But there's no Lance unit in this batch, but still something to be kept in mind. And let us begin with the star of this batch in lettering Alm. So lettering Alm was always a really strong nuke when he came out because he could just bust any kind of tank who had a lot of defense because of his preferred weapon. And upon his refine, he also got another lease of life and he was able to nuke better. But with time, we just got so many nukes that he just got overshadowed. But now we are in the metagame of Lin Ring, and this means that he can again go back and kill the tanks by taking advantage of a lot of the support that he can take by staying near your allies like dual strike or triangle attack. So all of that can help him nuke from far away, and he also has a good amount of true damage already with his weapon, and he has got wind sweep effect. So I think that those two things are something that you need on a good Lin Ring nuke. So that's why I think that he is salvageable if you provide him good amount of support. Support is definitely something he'll be needing, and I'm going to be talking about that a bit later on. So his weapon gives him +3 speed, no minus on special cooldown, and he gets +5 attack and speed in the combat, and true damage based on 25% of foe's defense. And this is going to be getting included in the AoE special. So if you want to, you could also run an AoE special lettering Alm, but mostly you're going to be running him with Lunar Flash. And this effect is why Alm is still salvageable, because at least he's got this kind of true damage, which is in good amount. Even for that time, it was really good, and even now, it can be worked out. And then he gets another round of +5 attack and speed, and Null Guard effect, which is helpful when you're going to be using him with triangle attack or dual strike support. So this lets him trigger his Lunar Flash on the second and the fourth hit. And then finally he has got the wind sweep effect, which means that he's only going to be affecting the foes that have physical weapon. And if he's facing someone like Duo Rhea with far save, then he's not sweeping her and he's going to be taking the counter attack. So for this sweep effect, there is the speed check where his speed should be equal to or more than foe speed +5. And this is going to be the challenging part because lettering Alm is a pretty old unit, so you would need a lot of speed stacking to make sure that you can have enough speed to meet the speed check of it against a lot of the modern tanks. Against most of the far saviors, I mean, you're going to be having the speed check as is because they are way slower than Alm. There are only very few like fast far saviors like Duo Fiarm, and that's pretty much it. Most of them are going to be slow like Nidhoker's, Attuned Hector, and stuff like that. And there's also Duo Rhea who can be used as a far savior, and for that you will need to tech because his wind sweep is not going to be working against her. His special remix is simple but useful. So Lunar Flash 2 is a 2 cooldown special, and it treats foe's defense or resistance as if it's reduced by 20%. And this also gives him damage based on 20% of his speed, and it also gives you full damage reduction piercing on its trigger, so he doesn't need any kind of damage reduction piercing skills most of the time because of having this kind of special. So overall, it seems like lettering Alm doesn't really have too many effects, but I would say that he has got some decent ones as the baseline, like the true damage, plus an attack and speed, and Null Guard, and the wind sweep effect. And the fact that he has got a full damage reduction piercing special that can scale off the speed is something that you could still use over Curve Shot, but Curve Shot is something you could pick up. And he is an old lettering unit, so he doesn't really score all that high. And if you're trying to use him as a nuke, then as I said, he would need a lot of support. So for his build, Reposition Gate is something you could try and get, as it does score high for Arena, and Curve Shot is the best Forma value you could get out of a special because he does not need Deadeye when he has got Lunar Flash too. So it's like an option to survive against a lot of the dragons with its damage reduction, so it can be helpful. So if the foe that you're facing is extremely bulky, then it can scale off the 30% of their defense, which I think is also helpful in the cases that they have really high defense. So it might just give you more damage output than Lunar Flash 2, but keep in mind that it doesn't have any kind of piercing whatsoever, so it is something you would need to give him externally through support. And then for the Slotty, I think that perfect attack speed is the perfect Slotty skill to give him plus 10 attack and speed, and it does work out for him because he's going to be staying near his allies with the Lin Ring, and it gives him the full null follow-up, which can help him nuke the tanks and get past their follow-up negation. And it also helps him with the speed check of his wind sweep, so it's a really good scale. But if you can provide the null follow-up support to him with some other ally, then Slice the Sparrow is also something you can pick up because it does give you plus 5 true damage per hit. So if you run him with triangle attack or dual strike, then he's going to be getting even more true damage. So it depends on if you want to have a more condensed build that already has perfect attack speed in it, or you want to opt for higher damage ceiling with Slice the Sparrow. So it's really up to you, and if you get extremely unlucky, then Verge of Death is at the very least something you could try and get. At least it can cleanse his attack and speed debuffs and gets rid of the panic, and it also helps if you are going to be running an AoE build with Legendary Alm and his true damage, which gets added to that. And I mean, Slice the Sparrow also helps with that, so Verge of Death is literally your last option, and it is the bare minimum, absolute bare minimum if you fail to get perfect or the Slice skill. Then for the slot B, I would say that the best skill to be obtained is Speed Taker. This is a must on Legendary Alm if you're going to be picking him, because this gives him even more true damage, and this true damage does not depend on foe's defense like of his weapon. This depends on his speed. So if you stack up a lot of speed on him, which you naturally should be, then it scales off his speed, and it also stacks up with the true damage of his weapon, so he can nuke hard, and he also gets the speed grade talent, which can help you just have more speed over the time and over the kills. And it also gives him the null speed debuff effect, so it is really helpful when it coming to meeting the speed check, as it can help you against the foes that can debuff your speed. And it does have a bit of an overlap with his weapon because Speed Taker also has Null Guard, but this kind of little overlap doesn't really matter because the reason we're running this is mainly because of the true damage. So this is the skill to stack up the true damage. It's extremely important on your nukes nowadays to stack that up, and thankfully Legendary Alm already comes with some of it. And if you get unlucky and do not get Speed Taker, then Assassin Strike is the next best option. It doesn't really give you the great talent or anything like that, but at least it gives you the true damage which he needs. And then finally for Slot C, you've got a lot of options, and it depends on which units you run with him or where you want to use him in arena and stuff like that. But overall, in my opinion, Attack Speed Pledge is really good Slot C skill that I like with him, because he does have Null Guard in his weapon for triggering Lunar Flash, and that can help him trigger it on the second hit and on the fourth hit if you run him with Triangle Attack or Dual Strike. So the second hit special is good, but the fourth hit quad attack special trigger is what is going to be deadly, because many of the shield fighter Far Saviors are not going to be getting any kind of damage reduction against the fourth hit, and in that hit Alm is going to be triggering his Lunar Flash 2 or even Curve Shot if you're running that, so that is going to be lethal against them. And at the fourth hit, they might have also exhausted any kind of Sturdy Beast, Armored Beacon, Dragon's Roar type of damage reduction out of a twin skill at that point if they do not run Shield Fighter. So triggering the special on the fourth hit is actually something that a lot of nukes try and do, and Alm has an easier time doing that with a Pledge skill, and because of the fact that he lacks a minus on special cooldown weapon. But if you want to have the special go off immediately, and if you don't want to wait for him to double or run him with some kind of Brave support, then Creation Pulse could be run, but just keep in mind that you'd need to run some support for the negative status effects on the enemies to get the Preempt Pulse out of it. Fatal Smoke is something that is needed on any kind of nuke nowadays because we just have so many miracle tanks. We have got Marnie, we have got Duo Rhea, and Duo Rhea gives that miracle to pretty much everyone. So if someone is faster than Alm and he's not able to double them, then without Fatal Smoke, he is going to be getting stopped by simply the miracle that they're being given by Rhea. So that's why it can be a necessity, especially for something like Summoner Duels. And if you're running Slice Sparrow, and if you don't want to give him any kind of external null follow-up support, then Oddspeed Wave 4 is also good because it can give you a lot of speed in the combat as a visible buff, and also the full null follow-up. And then if you want to go with some good old Time Pulse, then Time Pulse Edge is something you should be picking over Time Pulse 4 because Time Pulse Edge does give you a bit of extra offenses, which is always good. And if you get really unlucky, then at least Pulse of Blades is the bare minimum. At least you're going to be able to pre-charge Lunar Flash or Curve Shot when your Lin Ring is online on turn 2. I really want to emphasize that Legendary Alm is not going to be killing the modern tanks just with this build. He is going to be needing a lot of support, and some of the support is easier to have, like Bridal Catria, Winter Cordelia. You might just have them in your barracks from the old times, so he does appreciate that for the brave hits, which I explained before. Desert Marisa can also work, but usually he's going to be staying near his ally, so that's why the other 3 supportive flyers can work out. Haether is also something that can be used in Aster Season, and she can also support with stuff like Infantry, Null Follow-Up for Inner Slotsy, and also by having the debuffs from her assist. And then you could also try and run units that can give him the Null Follow-Up if he's lacking that, and if you're not running perfect attack speed in the slot A, or you can just have any kind of unit that can help him boost up his speed either with the debuffs on the enemy or with some kind of buffs on him. So Ninja Lucina is pretty much the perfect partner because she can give you the Future Witness status, which gives you -1 special cooldown, and if she does that 2 turns, then you have a pre-charged special, and she also gives you the Scowl effect through it. So that along with Curve Shot can really help Legendary Alm survive some of the dragons that may counterattack against him, and you also get the Detect and the Exposure debuff in middle of the turn, so that can also help nuke. Plumeria gives you a lot of true damage and can run Firestorm Dance to give you Desperation for the matchups where you face dragons, so it can help you just hit them 4 times if they're not running Hardy Bearing. Azura also gives you the Null Follow-Up. Sarah recently got a Refine, who can give that to you in the combat, and also gets you the Cleansing, so in the player phase it can be helpful to nuke and get rid of the debuffs. And then finally there is Legendary Xander, kind of underrated as a support, but for Alm he does work out nicely because he gives out the special cooldown +1 status and Null Follow-Up status. So if you're not running perfect attack speed or pledge on your build, then Xander is going to be giving you the effect which you're going to be lacking, and those really help with nuking. Now, just like I said with the Desperation effect, we have got Emblem Lin who can help you with that, and she can also snipe the other units. Lin also gives you Preempt Pulse, so against the dragons that have Scowl, this can help you offset that, and that's one of the reasons why I like Pledge so much on him as a Slotsy skill, because it doesn't get affected by the Scowl effect, and you're going to be facing Duo Rheas or some dragons that are Far Savior. So the thing with Pledge skill is that the only thing which can stop it is the full tempo effect or the defensive tempo effect, which not a lot of Far Save tanks have. So that's why it does work out better for triggering the specials. And Thor can also help you trigger your specials with Warbreaker Plus, and then Lorathor and Embla are both going to be helping you snipe the enemy units forcibly, either by inflicting the Assign Decoy on them, or in the case of Embla, also inflicting the Feud status and Unoffended status. And Embla can also give you the special charge support, so that way you could have a pre-charge special. And then finally, to deal with some of the Hardy Bearing dragons, you could run Ymir and fall back on the Miracle of Hers and then nuke the dragons by quad attacking. So these are just some of the example options that you can try and use, because with this support he can even kill like Nidhoggers, which is quite impressive for such an old unit, and a unit that we can get to update in this Hall of Forms. Now let's move on to Shadows of Valentia Palla, who is going to be getting a refine in a couple of months around August of 2025. It should be in the mid of 2025. So she is a simple yet elegant unit and I remember using her so much in Ether Raids as a Vantage unit and also in Summoner Duels as a hit and run unit. So she has got Lady Blade as 11 Mind dual phase brave weapon. This does have Canto 2 built in it, and this was the reason why she was so popular back then, because it was not easy to get Canto 2, and then you would combine this with a very cheap budget skill like hit and run in the slot B, and you'd be able to retreat like 2 spaces even against Canto control. And now you could imagine this is going to be pretty insane with Legendary Sakura's Salvage. So you could go ahead and look at my Summoner Duel videos of the past where I use her, and she basically pays for the penalty of the Brave effect by having -5 speed, which is not that big of a deal, and she does have the Hexblade effect. Now this Hexblade effect can be really helpful for taking down many of the tanks that have polarized bulk, but the thing is that any kind of modern top tier tank is going to be having mixed stat spread when it comes to their bulk. So Hexblade doesn't really do too much against them, but I guess it is a good thing to have. And the fact that this weapon gives you no stats in the combat and still she was used heavily in the competitive days just tells you a lot about that time. And I hope that she can get a lot of stats, true damage and stuff in a refine. So this is going to be a refine gamble that you would be taking with any kind of skills you get in the Hall of Forms. I've tried to keep in mind. So if you're going to be picking up a special, then No Quarter is the best one, because Haste Slice is unfortunately not in the Hall of Forms pool yet. So if you want to give her Haste Slice, then you would need to spend the Valentine Dimitri Combat Manual from Divine Code 6. Haste Slice would have been really amazing on her, along with Momentum, but unfortunately it's not possible right now. And you could also run her with Celica Ring, because she already has the skills that she can use to get the +1 movement, and she has got Canto in her weapon. So you could run Celica Ring, and because her slot B skill is relatively free, and if she gets some kind of piercing and true damage in her refine, then it gets even free. So you could run Pass and just get past any lower ground, higher ground, or barricade warp blocking. Then for the slot A, I would suggest Attack Defense Excel. Unfortunately, we do not have Sly Sturdy Blow yet. Otherwise, I would suggest that for the guaranteed follow-up attack and the true damage. But Attack Defense Excel is also good because it gives you the attack and defense is something that we need for scaling off the true damage of Assault Force. And Palla gets no stats out of her weapon, so you gotta give her some kind of defense to increase her true damage. And this also gives you flat damage reduction to fall back upon in case she gets hit, and she's not really all that frail, so she can certainly survive some hits. And if you do not get lucky and you don't get this Excel skill, then just try for Sly Mirror or Flare Mirror. Sly Mirror gives you the guaranteed follow-up attack and the true damage, but it doesn't give you any kind of defense for Assault Force usage. Flare Mirror can help you set up the flame terrain at the bare minimum, but just don't run this with Deadly Miasma. It doesn't work like that. For slot B, I would 100% recommend Assault Force. This is an incredibly rare and amazing skill for so many flyers and cavaliers, and especially for these kinds of units that do not have easy access to piercing, at least right now before her refine. So this gives you 50% piercing and also gives you the defense-based true damage, which Palla loves to have with her weapon. That is a brave weapon, so you get the true damage per hit, and you also have null debuffs, which is extremely good when you're going to be initiating as a player phase unit. Now Momentum is also an option, and if Haste Slice was present in the Hall of Forms, I would probably recommend this actually, but unfortunately it isn't. So if you run Momentum, then you're going to be triggering No Quarter on your Brave hit, but sometimes the enemies might have some kind of guard effect, so it might not trigger, and for that, you can hope that her refine gets some kind of null guard. Assassin Strike is also the last resort option if you get unlucky and if you do not get Assault Force or Momentum. Again, just like Legendary Alm, at least this gives you some true damage. So that is at least on the table that you can take. And then finally for slot C, she's got a bunch of options, but I think the best ones are the options that can give her the extra movement consistently. I do like Endless Tempest quite a lot on her because she already has Canto. So Brutal Tempest gets slightly overlapping, but still, Brutal Tempest does have the better Canto if you want to get that. But personally, I do like Endless Tempest and its Dull effect, so it can help her ignore any kind of visible buffs of the enemies, and you get the +1 movement consistently, unlike the Rain Snap skill, which needs you to have an infantry or an armor unit on your team. So if you run Palla on a full flyer team, she can still get the extra movement, which is what I like. And the other options are going to be a bunch of good skills. So Shadow Shift can work because she does have the Canto innately in her weapon, so there's no trouble triggering this. Rain Snap, as I said, is also an option to get the +1 movement, but Endless Tempest on a unit like her is a bit better. Fatal Smoke is also a fantastic option because keep in mind that she is a red unit and Marnie is a green unit with Miracle in her weapon and a lot of healing. So that's why if you run Excel skill, you get the damage reduction, and if you survive, you can easily quad attack and kill her. So this could be helpful in Arena Assault. And then Deadly Miasma could also be a way of getting the Dull effect, and you set up the haste rain and also get some in-combat debuff on the enemy. So this is also good, but probably don't get this if you already plan on giving her Soaring Echo and Deadly Miasma from Attuned Ivy. An attack resistance crux is also an option to get the guaranteed follow-up attack and also for debuffing the enemy's resistance, because she does have the Hexblade effect, so it does work out for her, and you don't need to go for speed defense crux because speed debuff does nothing for her. And finally, if you don't plan on giving her some kind of Soaring Echo attune skill, you could just run Soaring Guidance as a Slotsy skill or Guidance 4 so that it can provide the warp support. But for Palla, I do like to get some kind of skill that can help her in the combat, like Endless Tempest, Rain Snap, Fatal Smoke, Deadly Miasma, Crux, all of that. I don't prefer Shadow Shift or Soaring Guidance much, and Fatal Smoke is a really good option if you're a competitive player looking to use her in Arena Assault, and if she is usable after her Refine in something like Summoner Duels. There's another Refine Gamble unit in Luthier, and he might actually get a Refine before Shadows of Valentia Palla because he is just next in line after Miranda and Urk, so it could be 2-4 months from now in June of 2025, and he just has a Fox Tome. And these kinds of free-to-play refines can be a complete shot in the dark because you don't know if your refine is going to be turning out to be like Death Knight or if it's going to be turning out to be Seteth or even Ilyana. So I hope that he gets a good one. He does have a Fox Tome, and also Noel had that, so you could look at his refine. He might get something similar to that. They do love to copy paste at times, and Luthier is simply in a different color of mages, so it could happen. Luthier does take magic extremely seriously, but ultimately he's not as talented as his sister Delthea, so I think he might end up having some kind of supportive effect like many units do nowadays, and it could be an effect that could support the other versions of Delthea. So that's just my theory, but I'm not sure. Again, Refine Gamble that you must be taking. So there's not going to be any kind of Arcane Truth Fire, and neither should you be giving that to him just yet before his Refine. So you could get Tea-Time Set Plus, which is the best inhittable green tome in this Hall of Forms. It is the weapon of Tea-Time Ferdinand. It gives you half null follow-up, the offensive half, and it also gives you Canto 1, which is not bad for retreating after using the Lin Ring. Unfortunately, Bunny Maze Spring Air Egg Plus is not available right now, and I would say that that is the best overall green weapon because it gives you a lot of true damage. So I guess if you have extra maze, then you could give that to him, but again, his refine is kind of close, so I'll probably not do that myself. In the slot A, you could try and get Slice the Sparrow so that he could get some true damage. I feel like he is going to be getting more of a player phase oriented refine, seeing as how he has got a Fox Tome. So this skill could work with it and give him the true damage, and also the pseudo half null follow up with its guaranteed follow up attack. And he does have decent enough speed at max investment. And if you don't want to get Slice the Sparrow, then perfect attack speed could be the mixed phase option that you could get with some other alternative slot B skills, which I'll be suggesting. Now, I have recommended Frost Moon here. Does seem a bit weird on a unit with 40 resistance, but I mean, it's there for the Forma value. You might as well get this over Flare. but I also understand if you want to get Flare for its healing and you just want to have a complete build. But Frost Moon, I think, could also help if he ends up getting like, you know, plus 10 or plus 14 to all of his stats and something like that. So it could still hit decently hard and give him the full piercing, and against the enemies that he cannot double against, he could just get the preempt pulse out of it, and ultimately on its trigger he does get full piercing out of it, so it may help with some of the builds after his refine. We again don't really know, it's just a shot in dark. And for the slot B, could run Resonance because his HP is quite enough at max investment, so it can easily work out to give him the 12 true damage and 60% damage reduction piercing, and he's likely not going to be having the piercing in his refine. I don't really see a lot of free-to-play weapon refines have that, so you could probably try and get this if you're not going to be getting Frost Moon, and Resonance is going to be a pretty nice middle ground where it gives you the piercing and the true damage. Now, Lagu's Loyalty is also an option here that you could pick for him, but just keep in mind that Lagu's Loyalty is not a completely player phase skill. Its true damage and its rift effect is enemy phase only. So if you're trying to run this skill purely for the player phase, then I think that Resonance is better. Lagu's Loyalty also doesn't give you any kind of piercing, so you would need something else. And it does not give you as much true damage. The main thing that it has got going for it is the -2 cooldown preempt pulse Lagu style of special jump, which you could get in the combat, and then you could trigger you know, double special. So that is something that is possible even with Noel's Refine, but he runs Lagu's Friend. But Luthier here does not have as much bulk, so Lagu's Loyalty, scaling off his speed could also work. Speed resistance tempo in the worst case scenario could also be picked up because it does give you piercing and also the tempo effect to trigger specials easily. And then finally for the slot C, you could try and run something that can help him trigger the specials, because more than likely he's going to be having no -1 special cooldown effect. And as Refine, most of these demote and free-to-play units do not, if they already didn't come with a -1 special cooldown weapon, like Young Innis for example. So Time Pulse Edge can be run so that it can give you extra offenses in the combat, and you could also run Outspeed Wave 4 if you're not going to be running perfect attack speed on him. But if he ends up getting some kind of visible speed buff support, then the buff of Outspeed Wave 4 is going to be a bit redundant. Creation Pulse can also work so that he can immediately trigger a special, and this is going to be working well in conjunction with Time Pulse Echo if you give that to him later on after his refine. And if he ends up getting some kind of debuff natively in his weapon, then this can also age better. And attack speed pledge is also an option to get the special charges effect, especially if you have the tempo skill in the slot B. So this way you can trigger your specials easily, and especially on the second hit. The one thing I like to do on these refined gamble units is suggest things which are not generic effects and something that can be stacked up. For example, I recommended Slash the Sparrow as the primary option in the slot A, because even if he gets true damage, that's okay. He stacks up even more true damage with that skill. But if he gets the full null follow-up in his weapon, then perfect attack speed gets a bit more redundant. You only get the offenses out of it. And with Resonance, you still get the true damage and piercing. And even if you like get piercing in his refine, Resonance can still give you the true damage compared to something like Magical or the Tempo skill, which are used for the other effects. And Lagu's Loyalty is also something that can work well because its preempt pulse in the Lagu style can stack up with any other preempt pulse effect if he ends up getting that. And it also gives him the flat damage reduction, which also stacks up. So, you know, just try and get the things that can stack up. And even if he gets some kind of insane pulse effect in his weapon, Time Pulse Edge can still give you the stats in the combat, and it also stacks up with the other pulse effects. So I figured I would just explain my reasoning for the skills that I picked, because I'm trying really hard to make sure that the Forma build I recommend here ends up aging well. Of course, that is not in my control, but still, I mean, I could try my best. So let me know in the comments if this ends up being useful after his refine or not, if you're watching this after months. And then finally, we have got Spring Delthea here as a Blue Mage Cavalier. So Bright Shell Egg is a slaying weapon which can debuff the opponent for -6 speed and resistance if they are the nearest foes in 5 spaces, and she can also debuff them in the combat for -6 speed and resistance. And if the total value of the visible buffs on Delthea and the debuffs on the foe is 6 or more, then she gets half null follow-up, the offensive half, and if it's 18 or more, then she gets the sweep effect. So if you've got both attack and speed buff and the opponent has got debuffs to 2 of their stats, then she gets the sweep effect easily. And nowadays it is so easy to get it because the buffs and debuffs come like candy nowadays on these weapons. So with some decent support, you can easily activate this condition. And this is probably the best effect out of her weapon, but unfortunately, she doesn't have any kind of true damage or any other extra thing that she could use with the sweep effect and inflict on the enemy. So that's all it is, and you gotta run other skills to make the full use out of it. And because Seasonal Refine speed is about as much as Ardent speed, she should be getting a Refine in early 2029. Yeah, 2029, 4 years from now almost. So probably don't get the Forma build expecting her Refine anytime soon, I suppose. And with this build, you could try and change the weapon even to Magical Lantern because it does provide you with the unhindered movement status, so it can be a fun weapon. But if you're talking about the functionality, then Devoted Cup Plus is absolutely the best weapon in terms of the damage output. It has got high ceiling of true damage at 25 per hit, and it also debuffs the enemy for speed and resistance, just like her preferred weapon, but much more easily, and it also debuffs them for the Discord status. So you're mainly going to be missing the sweep and the minus and special cooldown effect if you run Devoted Cup Plus, so it's up to you if you want to use her preferred weapon or not. And again, Frost Moon is just a recommendation for the value. You could get Ruptured Sky, but Ruptured Sky is not really that good of a special, so if we're getting the specials which are not the best for her, then might as well get the one that can give you the piercing. And then for the slot A, Cavaliers do not have a lot of options. You could pick up Slice the Sparrow, as it can give you the pseudo half null follow-up if you're not running her preferred weapon, so that can help. And it also gives you the true damage, which she is lacking. You could also run Flared Sparrow, as with the Lindring usage, you could set up the flame terrain from a distance, and even if you're not using the Lindring, you could still set up the flame tile and then retreat. And because of her sweep effect in her preferred weapon, if you use it, it does get a bit easier to set up the terrain and override the enemy's terrain. So I certainly see the applications for that, and Verge of Death is the bare minimum option if you don't get the other 2 skills that I've recommended. For slot B, Resonance is a pretty nice option, but she doesn't have the highest HP, so 50 HP is the benchmark to get all of the effects out of Resonance at max. So you can get 12 true damage and 60% damage reduction piercing, and this is going to be working a bit better if you can outsource some kind of Canto to her, like from the Canto 1 status of many of the units that give out that, or you run Fortress Echo on her later on after getting the Forma. So that is also an option if you plan on giving her even more premium skills. But if not, and if you just want to have the Canto in her build that you get in the holoforms, then you could get Speed Resistance Fortress 4, and this can give you 7 true damage with something. And finally, the last resort option is Occultist Strike. It doesn't give you piercing like Resonance, it doesn't have Canto like the Trace skill, but it does have true damage that can scale off the opponent's resistance, so that's something. And then finally, in the slot C, you could try and get Inside Attack Speed because it does have good synergy with her preferred weapon for giving her the visible buffs, and it also gives you the Insided status for the player phase usage. But I do like Fatal Smoke quite a lot on her, because competitively this can help you use her sweep effect and then inflict the deep wounds effect and null miracle status on the enemy. So it can be helpful if you're able to outsource the visible buffs and debuffs for Delthea's playstyle. And Oddspeed Wave 4 can also help with her preferred weapon by giving her some of the visible buff and also the full null follow-up effect along with extra speed, so it can help her double better. And then finally, Shadow Shift is also an option, but it is going to be needing Canto, so you must have Sigurd Ring, Fortress 4 in her slot B, or Fortress Echo, or some kind of Canto support given as a status maybe. This month, we're going to be having a poll for the Revival, and these are going to be the 4 options. Brave Camilla recently did get a Resplendent, and Miranda's Weapon Refine is coming up. And you could get a lot of good dagger skills like Active Lookout for Kat and Igren, so let's see who wins out of these. And the one that gets the least amount of votes is going to be getting eliminated. So you could look forward to the Revival. And I want to thank all of my YouTube members for their constant support. And you can click the link on the screen right now to check out my breakdown of the refines of this month. And make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because YouTube sub boxes are about as functional as trying to get Slice 30 Blow on Palla in this Hall of Forms. So with that, I'll see you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching and have a great day.